Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Center Street Stormwater Infrastructure Improvements presentation. Like to thank you all for coming out this evening, giving us some of your time to talk about this project, learn a little bit about it. This project is a grant-funded project. The grant funding is from the South Carolina Rural Infrastructure Authority. We'll touch on that in a little bit, but first we'll cover the agenda. We'll get into some introductions, talk about the project team, then we'll dive into some project information. We'll talk about what we're doing, and then we'll end up talking about what to expect during construction. For those of you who have not been to one of our events yet, this is the third engagement event that we've hosted for this project. We did one in January, one in February, and we'll do one more shortly before construction actually kicks off. So, you know, we're really out trying to get the word out about what the project is, collect feedback from the community. We've incorporated some of the feedback that we've received so far into the design. And, you know, we're really just trying to keep communications open about what's going to happen, what to expect, what construction is going to look like, and what the benefits are from this project. So jumping into the introductions, my name's Chris Pyman. I'm the project manager from Weston & Sampson. We're the design and permitting engineering firm. We teamed up with JMT on this project, and I'll let Andy introduce himself.
Yeah, I'm Andy Carrier. I'm with JMT. So Weston & Sampson's is all of JMT. No, I was the only one who could make it today, but I'm the deputy PM on the JMT side of things. We did a lot of the stormwater analysis, looking at where to place inlets, where to look at pipe upsizing, and basically the modeling at that point.
We've got Megan Moody in the crowd. She's our technical lead on the project, and she'll just be here to answer any questions if we don't have the answers to them. And then we've got Louise.
Hi, I'm Louise Copel. I'm the project engineer. I did a lot of drafting plans and stuff for this project.
Kim?
Hey everybody, Kim Morganello. I'm the resilient urban designer on the project. I'm also a City of Folly Beach resident. So I was like out on the street, any given opportunity, you know, taking extra measurements, watching things whenever it rained. And yeah, I think we've created something that the City of Folly Beach can be really proud of.
And I'm Kayla Pell, and I am helping with the regulatory piece and submit all the permits for the project.
Chris, can everybody hear okay in the back? Can y'all hear? Okay, thanks.
Cool. Well, yeah, actually forgot to mention there is popcorn if you want some and haven't gotten any. Popcorn machine in the back. There's bags. And
Chris, there's water in the kitchen and cups. The water is
and
no bottled water.
okay.
It is clean. Filters someone.
It doesn't work. The clicker doesn't work. Sure.
I'm really good at button pushing.
Technical lead and button pusher, Megan. All right, cool. So jumping into the project information, we're going to let Kim tell you a little bit about the life of a raindrop.
So you guys, I know everybody knows this, but we just we like to just kind of start here to make sure that we're all, you know, starting around the same place. And that's just thinking about the water cycle. How we all learned about the water cycle in 5th grade, you know, upper elementary, middle school, whenever that was for you. But we know that humans, we've really kind of altered the way that water moves across the landscape, right? We know that in a natural system, it rains, that water has the ability to infiltrate. We have plants that are soaking it up and transferring it back out into the atmosphere. We have some of that water running off, but not as much. Whereas in our more human environment, so we think about the building that we're sitting in now, we're under this great roof in this wonderful community center. We're surrounded by, you know, a street and a parking lot and sidewalks, all these things that we need as humans, but they're also surfaces that water is unable to infiltrate. Those are impervious surfaces. So whenever water hits those surfaces, it runs off. And whenever it runs off, We have, as humans, created these systems to manage that water and traditionally move it away from us as quickly as possible. And along that path, we've created, community flooding concerns, as well as water quality concerns, because that water picks up a number of diverse pollutants along the way. So I know y'all can't see this, but on the right, there's a really great graphic that kind of shows almost that inverse relationship between a more natural watershed or natural environment and the more urban environment. So when I said it's inverse relationship, we know, like, from research that's happened in the Francis Marion Forest, whenever it rains there, maybe about 10% of the water that falls in that forest is actually running off, is actually becoming part of a stream and making its way to the ocean. Whereas in a more urban environment like downtown Charleston, you might be looking at more like 70, 80% or even more of the water that's falling on there is running off. And so, just as a general thing for us all to be aware of, any of the water that's entering our storm drains out here on Center Street is being discharged into the Folly River. So we just kind of want to preface with that, because that, I think, kind of informs some of the design decisions that we made and wanting to be good stewards to our Folly River and associated shellfish beds and recreation and quality of life and all the wonderful things that come along with our water resources here at Folly Beach.
So looking at this project, let's take a look at some of the benefits and the goals that we're tasked to solve here. The big one is improving drainage and the flooding along Center Street, residences and businesses. And we're doing this by increasing the capacity of the underground system, as well as providing some additional storage above ground. And we'll touch on all this as we progress through the slides here. Another thing that we wanted to do is beautify Center Street, look at vegetation, look at natural conditions and green stormwater infrastructure that we can implement that'll provide that water quality benefit that Kim touched on, and create more of a green, complete streets is what they're called. By doing this, we looked at the model with today's conditions, and then we also developed a model looking out 100 years in the future and what we call rain bomb events. The 2 inches over 3 hours that nobody expects is going to happen. We looked at all 3 of those, as well as under a king tide condition. And how that matters is if the tide's up, water can't leave. So our job as engineers is, let's see how we can store that underground, get it out of people's front yards as much as possible, and wait for that tide to recede so that the watersheds can dewater.
Touched on this in the intro slide. The project funding for this is it's administered by the Rural Infrastructure Authority of South Carolina. It's funded by a SCIP grant, the South Carolina Infrastructure Investment Program. Essentially, those are funds for local South Carolina governments to invest into their infrastructure for improvements to the drinking water system, sanitary sewer system, and stormwater systems to improve resilience. The canned language is that this project is being funded in whole or in part by the South Carolina Infrastructure Investment Program, which is administered by the South Carolina Rural Infrastructure Authority, funded by federal, state, and local fiscal recovery funds through the American Rescue Plan Act. So let's dive into the project a little bit. We've got a map up here showing the project site. We are right about here. And so you can see outlined in this teal outline, it's our project digital boundary, and that's essentially the limits of disturbance to the ground area. So as you can see, it's all of Center Street from the Folly River Park to the Atlantic Ocean. We're going to be touching most of the side streets. So we're doing some work on East Arctic, East Ashley, East Cooper, East Erie, and East Huron. And then over in that corner of the map, we're going to be doing some additional work over at the East Erie Ave and 8th Street East outfall. So just kind of giving you an idea of the general project area. We'll start diving into what we're going to be doing. So this is the general overview of everything we're doing above ground and below ground. All the orange circles represent new stormwater inlets. The blue lines indicate underground pipes. The yellow lines indicate surface level pervious parking, and the green areas indicate bioretention cells. So that's going to be another surface level green infrastructure approach. And we'll kind of dive into the details of these here in the next slides. And then this is a little close up of the other project area over at East Erie and 8th Street East. Again, this location is just going to be below ground improvements with the pipes and the inlets. And talking on the project timeline, I'm sure some of you are wondering, okay, we've heard about this for a few months. When's it going to happen? We started design back in December of 2023. We're in the permitting process now, and we're finalizing the design. We anticipate this project going out for bid in the October-November timeframe with an award in December of this year. So we expect construction to start in the first few months of 2025, so sometime in that January to March timeframe. Construction will go through 2025 into 2026, and the project closeout will be completed by June of 2026. All right, now we're gonna back up.
I did a lot. Okay,
Right there.
I was gonna stop there. You go ahead. I'm a terrible button pusher.
All right. Now that we're back on track, we're gonna dive underground. I'll let Andy talk a little bit about this one.
Nice. Yeah. So let's take a look at all the improvements we're doing below the surface, as Chris had mentioned on the previous one. So the only difference between this and the past slide is we took off what's above ground. All the blue that you see here is all new and replaced storm pipe. And in existing conditions on the east side of Center Street, there is a stormwater system that collects all runoff along Center Street and discharges up here at Folly River Park. We're going to maintain that alignment of pipe, but we're going to increase the pipe size almost by 2 times in some places. In addition to that, we're looking at the other side of the street, the west side of Center Street as well, by adding a new, we call them trunk lines, a new linear line of pipe that'll run along the sidewalk and the shoulder there. And they'll all combine down here, almost right where we're at, across the street there, and then discharge at Folly River. We're also, no, you're good, you're good. I wanted to mention here, so on Erie and Huron, both known areas that flood with the existing ditch systems actually just holds water permanently. We're well aware of that, so we're looking at replacing those ditches with pipes and inlets, and also providing some new parking areas, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. I don't want to spoil the surprise. Next one, yes. And then down here at East Erie and 8th Street, there's an existing storm drain system that's on the northern side of the street there. That'll be maintained in some fashion. Right now, there is a tide flap on the downstream side right there in the marsh, but it's missing. So a lot of the high tides end up backflowing up into the system. You'll notice some marshy grasses along the area. That just means there's a lot of saltwater intrusion. So what we're going to do is we're going to increase the capacity by separating both sides and putting a dedicated system on the other side, more of an upsized and increased capacity on that end. So I touched on it with the increasing pipe sizes, but by looking at areas that we know based off of the last year of analysis and the 2 public meetings that we had here, we've listened. So we know these areas exist. You can see here, Louise, our actor, in the flooding from Tropical Storm Debbie. We were out here. We were looking at areas that flood, areas that hold water for prolonged periods of time, and we were verifying that with our model and adding those inlets as needed. So I touched on increasing capacity, and what that means is how much water we can hold underground in the event that high tide is there. You can see here by this graphic, we went from 20,000 cubic feet to almost 50,000. That's more than double. That's strictly by increasing the pipe sizes. And on top of that, we are adding 50% more inlets along the corridor, more catch basins to collect that water and get it underground as fast as we can. Kim?
Oh, yep. I'm between the green. So, and is the slide deck going to be on the website? Like, if people want to look at it?
It can be.
Yeah. Would that be helpful? You guys can take a closer look at it. All right, thanks. So now we'll talk about what's going to happen above ground. So below ground, y'all may have heard the term gray infrastructure before. That's just a term that gets thrown around for pipes and culverts and that, sort of the traditional engineering approach to handling stormwater. The above ground is what we would also call as green infrastructure. So those are going to be landscape level approaches. And I'll talk a little bit more about those here. Louise, are you talking here? Is this your slide? This is your map.
I think mine was the next one, but I can.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. All right. One thing that we've really noticed, we noticed it in the model, but we also just through observations, is that a lot of times whenever we have ponding or we have water in the commercial district, it's really, being held in those like parallel parking areas. So that's an opportunity that we can give water an opportunity to infiltrate into our, high performing sandy soils, as opposed to sending it off to the Folly River, untreated. So this map just kind of shows we have currently six bioretention cells, and I'll talk more about what those are. That's kind of a fancy word for rain garden, a little different, but 6 bioretention cells and 39 pervious parking spaces slotted for Center Street.
So here's just a graphic of the parking spots that'll be taken away and the ones that'll be added. So we're adding 17 new parking spots, and those will be in those ditched areas on here on an Erie that aren't working right now. So we're going to replace that with the pipe, cover the pipe, and then add turf stone pavers on top, and people will be able to park there. And then the parking spots we're removing on Center Street, we're replacing with the bioretention cells that Kim will talk a little bit more about.
So this is a great photo. I think really exemplifies really what we've observed, and I'm sure you all have observed. This is there in front of the Sand Dollar. This is a great opportunity. Obviously that water's not able to get through the asphalt there. So this is a great opportunity for us to incorporate those green infrastructure approaches. And really what we're trying to do with those approaches, we're trying to mimic pre-development hydrology. So the way water moved across the landscape when we were talking about the Francis Marion Forest, we're trying to recreate that with green infrastructure by giving water the opportunity to infiltrate on site, to be treated on site, as opposed to being piped to the Folly River. So this is a great sort of proof of concept right out front here. This is our rain garden here at the community center. Folly has a few of these around, but it was really fun to watch this work during Debbie as well as other events. Debbie was an excellent opportunity for us just to come out and do some ground truthing. That was right at what we call a 25-year design storm, actually a little bit over. So we got just about 9 inches of rain. This is at my house, about just under 9 inches of rain in 24 hours. And so a 25-year design storm, it's 8 or 8.5 inches. So that was a really great opportunity to go out and see it. And the next slide shows a video that hopefully we'll be able to play. This is, Megan, if you hit that, there you go. This is what we call a treatment train approach. So this is the community center, the building we're in now. That water's coming off the roof. It's going through this filter. This is called a first flush diverter, where the dirtiest water is coming out. And then we're going through our cistern. That's coming, whenever that fills up, it's overflowing into the rain garden. And you can see that whenever we zoom out here in just a second, you can see the water coming out of this 2-inch PVC into the rain garden. There's no water on the sidewalk here, right? We're putting water where we want water to go, and we're creating a space for water to kind of slow down and to infiltrate, like an appropriate space for water to slow down and infiltrate. And along the way, we're able to, incorporate a lot of native plant species and have these other, ecological benefits that we like to see in our communities as well. So yeah, next time it rains, if you get a chance to come out here, it's really fun to watch it work. Next slide, please, Megan. But yeah, the treatment train is just giving water multiple opportunities. So we're not using a practice by itself. We're using multiple practices in combination. So that's the idea that we want to have here on Center Street, is this treatment train approach. This is a design graphic of those bioretention cells. And so this is existing. This is in front of City Hall, I believe. This is that one. Further,
Yeah, more towards us.
more towards
Here.
that. Oh, is it?
I think so.
I think that's City.
Oh, no, you're right. You're right. I'm sorry.
Anyways, so this is in front of City Hall. So you can see we have some space to work with here. We've got some areas along Center Street that have been sort of slated for bicycle parking, but you might notice that a lot of times those aren't necessarily used for bicycle parking. They might have trash cans there or other things. So potentially using that in some areas so that we don't have to sacrifice a vehicle parking spot. But we want to take 6 parking spot sized areas and convert those into bioretention cells. So your parking spots along Center Street are around 23 feet in length and 8.5 feet wide. When we're looking at our it's almost like a rain garden in a box. So it actually has this here is almost like a curb, right? It's like a concrete separator where you have a prefabricated concrete box that will basically go in there, and then we'll fill it in. We'll have some stone at the bottom, but then it's largely going to be this filter media, which we can spec it out that it actually is very effective at removing bacteria pollution, which of course here, we see the Charleston Waterkeeper putting out swim advisories, and that's very concerning for, shellfish harvesting and recreation and swimming and all of those things. We can also capture our microplastics here. So you guys have seen, I'm sure, coming out of the Citadel, how we're finding microplastics in our shrimp and in our fish and in our shellfish. And we can capture all sorts of pollutants here before it gets discharged downstream through this filter media here. Then you'll see a layer of mulch, and then we're going to use largely native vegetation, because a lot of times these plants are going to be very dry. And a lot of times these plants are going to be very wet. And so typically the plants that perform best in that environment are native vegetation. Because, we've all been in a South Carolina summer. Sometimes it's very dry for weeks on end, and then other times it's very wet for, rains for 7 days straight. So our plants that are native here typically survive well in those conditions. Next slide, please, Megan. So this is just taking that space, kind of showing how we sort of reorient things. We would have a 2-foot buffer into the vehicle travel lane. And there's, design specs that we'll be following for that. And then the next one, please. This is just kind of showing, this is a quick sort of rendering of what that would look like. So, there's also a lot of benefits there for mitigating that heat urban island effect, where it gets so hot on Center Street in the middle of the summer. Having vegetation, between us and the cars is a great way to sort of bring down those temperatures as well. And then last slide for me, this permeable pavement. We are still in the decision-making phase on what that looks like. There's a lot of options, a lot of local examples. This is James Island Town Hall. If you've been over there, you've seen the permeable pavers, the way those work. The paver itself is not permeable, meaning water can go through it, but it's the way that they fit together. And you see a lot of driveways out here on Folly that use those, but it's the pore space in between the pavers, and the base has to be done just right in order for it to function and allow water to infiltrate. Maintenance is going to be really key with these options, and we've been working really closely with City of Folly Beach on that. Good news is Center Street gets street swept once a week. So, you might know people on Folly whose permeable driveways don't work anymore, but it's also like, how often are you maintaining that? How often are you cleaning that, keeping that surface clean? Because you don't want these pore surfaces to get clogged. The other option is a porous concrete or a porous asphalt. This is at our Baxter Patrick James Island Library. They've got a great example there of that porous concrete. And you can see here, regardless of what we do, there'll be this, they call it like a concrete ribbon, but it'll be, pretty much flush between the travel lane and the parallel parking, but it really creates that separation. This is one that material that we're considering. It's called Power Block. Out here at Folly, one thing we're concerned about is all the sand coming off the beach, all the sediment, foot traffic, and we want to make sure we pick something that's going to be able to work under those conditions.
Thanks, Kim. All right, so now that we talked about what we're doing underground and above ground, we'll talk a little bit about what to expect during construction. So as I mentioned earlier, we're expecting construction to kick off sometime January, February, March of 2025. So what is that going to look like? It's going to look like a lot of, construction equipment. It's going to be adjusted traffic patterns on Center Street. There's going to be adjusted pedestrian walkways. Access to the Center Street businesses is going to look different. The overall effect, as we mentioned, we're most likely looking at removal of 4 parking spaces on Center Street, but that's coming with the addition of 17 parking spaces in the project area. There will be tree removal. The trees along Center Street are going to have to be removed for the construction to be performed. They will be replanted when the project's done and we do all the project restoration. And right now we're targeting about a 25% increase in the number of trees along Center Street. So, the adjustments, the traffic patterns, pedestrian walkways, access to business, obviously it's not a one size fits all thing here. So it's really going to be kind of a block by block, case by case, how you're going to get, to your favorite restaurant or bar or store during the construction process. We can talk a little bit more about that during the question and answer period. I'm sure people may have some questions about that. All right, I'm going to pass this to Kayla now, and she's going to talk a little bit about some of the critical areas and the protections for the salt marsh during construction.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So I'll be talking about the protections that we're giving to the salt marsh because we all love the salt marsh and it needs to be protected. So with the increased pipe sizes and the increased water volumes being discharged, the marsh could be impacted by scour. So to reduce that, we are going to put in some small stone riprap aprons at the 2 outfalls. Next slide. So this is just an exhibit of the Center Street outfall, which is the one at Folly River Park. And you can see this teal area right here is the riprap apron. It'll be about 135 square feet. And you can see that we'll also be putting in a turbidity curtain, which is right here, to help with the sediment and erosion during construction. And you can see the green part is the marsh area. Go to the next slide. And then this is an image of the 8th Street and East Erie outfall. You can see it looks a lot like the other one. The riprap apron is here in teal, and it'll be about 70 square feet. And then you can also see we'll have a turbidity curtain there as well during construction. So then just a few more salt marsh protections that we'll be putting in place. We will not be having any new impervious surface area. We'll be using the treatment train approach, which Kim mentioned earlier, which was the use of multiple best management practices, which will help treat stormwater before it goes into the Folly River. And then we will be using those erosion and sediment control options like the turbidity curtain during construction. And I will pass it off to Chris.
Thanks, Kayla. All right, that's the end of the presentation on the project, and we'd like to thank you for coming out and open it up to any questions that y'all may have. Yes, sir.
Altered traffic patterns on Center Street. Obviously, a lot of construction equipment. Is there going to be a single lane that still works on Center Street for just through traffic, or is everything going to be routed away from Center Street?
So the question was, is there going to be a single travel lane for through traffic on Center Street, or will everything be detoured around it during construction? SCDOT is going to issue a set of provisions and requirements for the encroachment permit for this work, and I'm assuming they will have something to say about what the traffic layout on Center Street is going to look like. At this point, we're anticipating maintaining at least one lane of through traffic, if not two. Our preliminary traffic control, we're thinking we would take one of the through traffic lanes and divert traffic from that into the center turn lane so we could maintain two-way traffic. If that's not an option on a certain block, then we would set up a detour to go off and around Center Street and come, back on outside of the construction zone. But, when this is under construction, it's not like the whole east side of Center Street is going to be fenced off at once for construction. We're really going to, set this up so that the contractor goes kind of block by block. So it's going to be, an impact localized to a 1 to 2 block stretch along Center Street at a time. So we're not kind of shutting the whole thing down. Yes.
Do you have an idea of which side you would start at?
The question was, do we have an idea of which side we will be starting at? The project's going to start at the park at the outfall to the Folly River, and it's going to progress up Center Street towards the ocean. What happens when you get to Indian and you have one line coming over to the west side? Don't know for sure whether they, the contractor would choose to go up the west side first, then come back and go up the east side, or go up the east side, then do the west side. But we anticipate it would be kind of, like I said, 1 to 2 blocks at a time, and they would kind of progress their way up the street. So yeah, I can't say at this time whether they would do all of the east side first, then start working their way up the west side.
Typically, we don't specify that. We do specify that the contractor needs to communicate to those who will be directly impacted ahead of the schedule that they're going to be making those impacts, so that those folks who will be impacted most know when to expect them.
How much time do you work there? So just like, how much time would you know before?
I would expect to tell the contractor to give 2 to 3 weeks notice, but if it needed to be more, the city of Folly Beach can dictate that as well. We can make it further out.
Yes.
This is more for City of Folly Beach. Do y'all know of communications to businesses in regards to when movement is going to be happening? So which block they'll be working on, kind of how y'all are doing with the pump systems currently?
Traditionally, we would follow the same plan we do for storms, the pumps and everything else. Direct the pad and
Yes.
Will the park be closed during this construction? What is a
So the questions were, and I guess I should just point out, we're recording this so we can put it on the city's website after the fact. So I'm repeating all the questions back so we can get those on the recording. But the camera's looking at me and not y'all. So the question was, will the park be closed during construction, and what is a turbidity curtain? I would say that the park itself overall would not be closed. There will be portions of it that will be inaccessible during construction because the outfall goes through the park, kind of right underneath the picnic shelter. So kind of that corner of the park where the picnic shelter is on Center Street coming up to Indian, we'll be going through that corner of the park. So I'd say portions would be inaccessible, but most of the park should stay open during construction of this project. So it'll be, construction fence to prevent people from getting into the construction zone during construction of that portion. And I would anticipate, well, I'll stop there. In terms of the second part of the question, what is a turbidity curtain? I think I'll let Andy speak to that a little bit.
So a turbidity curtain, turbidity barrier, oftentimes we chop off the first half, which is floating. And the purpose, it's basically a silt fence. If you've ever seen a construction site that had that black fence surrounding it, it's just a very long one that's, for lack of better words, attached to a pool noodle. So when the tide comes in, it floats up with the tide, and when the tide recedes, it floats back down. The goal is that any sediment, any water that's got a bunch of dirt in it doesn't leave that area. It's all held within that area and filtered out. Yes.
and it's weighted at the bottom.
Right. It's anchored to the floor so that it doesn't move. Oftentimes they can be very long. They can be 17 to 20 feet long. This one's not going to be spec that long because the tide doesn't rise as much. But
So it looked like most of it was pipe systems. Are y'all planning on doing underwater retention systems as well, or no?
so the question was, are we looking at doing any underground retention systems? We had initially looked into that during our 30% design phase. The problem with that is the utilities that would need to be relocated in order to accommodate something like that. So we had gone with the approach of upsizing our pipes as much as possible, the new pipes as much as possible, to act as an underground retention system in the event that the tide restricts outflow of water through the Folly River Park and at Erie and 8th Street East. Excuse me.
And the project is required to hold or to refrain from releasing the first inch and a half of water that falls, an inch and a half of rain. And our green infrastructure and bioretention cells serve for that purpose.
Any other questions?
Will the city have plans in place so that when the flow of traffic is limited on Center Street, what happens on Folly Road with people trying to get to the beach? Because it's not uncommon if you have a pedestrians crossing, that alone can back traffic up out on Folly Road, and you add more congestion to that over a period of time. What the projection might be of time just to get home from Harris Theater. I mean, I'm speaking probably for everybody.
Yeah. You want to take this one? We should give it
That was
to him
a very
as the
kind-
Folly
Yeah. So I guess I'm not 100% clear on exactly what the question is. Like, will there be?
Alternate routes? Are you going to be rerouting, designated maybe one way Indian and one way Indian on the east side, and for ingress and egress to get in and out, to get traffic so that it's moving onto the island and not just sitting out there because people don't know which way they're supposed to go or what they're supposed to do.
Yeah. So there will definitely be, project signage and traffic control set up in order to move traffic as efficiently as possible. We have a graphic set up here for kind of an example of what it might look like where, we shut down this travel lane. The red arrows indicate normal traffic flows. The blue arrows indicate a proposed, detour around the block, go up East Erie, come back East Hudson, back onto Center Street to keep moving. Without being able to answer specifically every block and intersection, the general idea is, there will be traffic detours and rerouting traffic around the construction sites, with adequate signage and traffic control in place to keep the traffic moving. And
We're going to try to maintain two-way traffic on Center Street as much and as often as possible.
And that's my main concern.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, if you shut it down to one lane, you have a whole different.
You've got, it becomes impassable on West Indian. You couldn't get an emergency vehicle down there if you had to. And so that's my main concern.
When the work goes across Center Street, which does happen in multiple different areas, there will be a traffic plan that works for that. Either the work will be done at night, because that will be an obvious place where you have a full closure of the road on both sides. That might be night work. It increases the cost of the project. So if there were daytime work, it would hopefully be at a not peak season time frame, because again, shutting down Center Street is a very poor option. So we're going to refrain from doing that as much as possible.
Boy, Amazon's gonna be upset.
But they have a smile on their truck.
All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns? We've got a couple sets of the most up-to-date version of our plan set on the table here. We figured we'd spare you with putting the plans into the presentation because they're not as exciting as Kim's pictures and Louise's graphics. But if you are interested and you want to see what it looks like on paper, we've got a couple sets here you can look through. If you want to ask us any questions one-on-one, we'd be happy to answer. Still got some popcorn in the back, water in the kitchen. We'll be doing this again at 5 o'clock. If you want to just hang out, we'll, be happy to, get some feedback, what we did better first and second time. Otherwise, we'll set you free.
You have a soft shoe routine.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks, Jenna. All right. Any questions? And I'm going to repeat the questions back so we can record this and get the audio to put out for anybody that wasn't able to join.
Great presentation, very good. We appreciate this, what you're all doing. This is good for all of us that live on here. We're full-time residents, Mary and Mary. We live down on the 10th block. So as you're doing this project on Center Street and the water is being put out mostly into the Folly River, and you're doing the best mediation to not scour and whatnot, that water goes back out to the river, which is great. Where we are down on the 10th block, we suffer from water coming in from the riverside. So, our concern is, it is all going out there to take the water out of here, but it has to go somewhere. So, I'm just throwing that out there, that it is something to be thought of. Water goes somewhere. And this might be also for the city in their next phase of how we're working with trying to help manage other areas. The 8th Street, for instance, that water's going right back. We know that 8th Street, it does flood tremendously, as do we. So it's going to be going out there, but that water still has to go somewhere else. And then on top of that, I'd ask when we're walking about sanitation. This is the flood water. What about, we're curious about sewage lines, or is that part of the whole scheme of your project?
So I guess the question is there any sanitary sewer aspects related to this project? No, not this project, no. This is strictly stormwater. This project. There's no sanitary sewer aspects to this project.
As far as the water being put out and being put out to the river, and again having to come in elsewhere,
So
we would have to do the calculations for that, but my guess is that it would be about the size of a shot glass in an Olympic pool. It's a very small amount compared to what the capacity is in the
and I guess not exactly an answer to your question, but something that we didn't bring up yet is flow control during tides, tidal cycles during high tides. How do we keep the water from coming back up into the system? So here's a little schematic about some of the features that are going to be implemented in the project. Both of the outfalls, the Folly River Park outfall at Center Street to the Folly River, as well as at 8th Street East and East Erie, they're going to have check valves, flap valves, tide valves installed just upstream of the outlet to the Folly River. So the way these function is when the water on the tidal side is higher than the water on the upland side, the valve shuts and it doesn't let that tidal flow up into the system. And then as the tide goes out and the water on the upland side is higher, it pushes that valve open and allows it to freely flow back out. So that is one thing that we did not mention yet is, how do you keep the high tide from coming back up into the system and flooding everything out?
And I'll just add to this that we're fortunate here that we have the Folly River that's just a conveyance machine. You know, it's just taking water out to the ocean for us. So, you know, in this graphic here, as that water is able to get out to the Folly River, that Folly River from this point is flowing to the ocean in that direction. It's flowing towards the west side. It's not flowing towards your direction. So it's able to pick up that water and on an outgoing tide. Of course, that's different on an ingoing tide. Yeah.
So we think of king tides and various scenarios when there's a king tide at every year, you know, Christmas time, and the river just completely.
Right.
At those times, the pipes are holding the water. It's not adding because it can't get out.
For Center Street.
For Center Street, right, okay, right.
Do you have a scenario where the December 17th flood event, this is what happened, this is what, if this was in place, this is what it would look like? Do you have a presentation or something on that line that says that?
So the question was, I'm going to rephrase it a little bit, but basically, did we recreate what had happened in December 17th? That was the early stages of our design. So knowing what we know now, I could tell you what we had modeled today, and then looking into the future, we had a very comparable storm. Everything was run at a king tide similar to December 17th. So the model that we have and we based our proposed design off of, in a sense, had December 17th in mind and the future events like December 17th moving forward.
The rain that you use to calibrate and validate the model, which storm event did you all use?
So we had looked at a rain bomb, which was 2 inches over 3 hours, which I think occurred. The one we looked at occurred in 2022, but we had one very similar a couple weeks ago, pre-Debbie, that actually Eric had sent us a bunch of pictures of. So we looked at that as well from a calibration standpoint, just basically to validate what we're showing.
What did the success rate show with the new pipes in your demonstration? What was
So what did the success rate show for the December 17th event? Basically, like, how does it function, right? I'll talk in terms of, we looked at dewatering time, and then we call it stage, basically how high does the water go in elevation relative to elevation. The most important thing to us when we look at capacity is how fast does water leave. I'm happy to see our design, we were able to essentially shrink that in half almost. I don't have the number of hours in front of me, but the existing system, we're talking about over a day. The new system happens in almost less than 2 tide cycles, like low tide cycles. Once the high tide comes up, is you gotta wait, and then it recedes. The other one was extrapolated over a number of tide cycles.
how about the height?
The height, again, I don't have the exact number on top of my head, but I would say ballpark a foot. Less than what happens today, right now.
Do you have any other questions?
Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
Excellent questions, by the way.
Yeah, very good question.
Is there a plan for the impact on traffic on Center Street?
So the question was, is there a plan for the impact
Within the construction zone?
to traffic on Center Street within the construction zones? Yes, I was going to try to think of something funny to say, but yeah. So yeah, I guess kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, like, there's not a one size fits all approach. So, it's probably going to look different depending on which block the construction is happening on, but the kind of general schematic that we're showing here is, let's say that, this is the block of construction in between Hudson and Erie. The red arrows indicate normal traffic flows. The blue arrows indicate proposed detours. So, we would probably keep the travel lane on the west side of the street open and we would detour traffic heading on the east side of Center Street, 1 block up to Second, and then back around to get around that location. And how that looks on a block by block basis may change depending on, is there a center turn lane? Is there, is it the bottom block down by Arctic where there's the median? So, some of this is going to be dictated by the Department of Transportation. SCDOT is going to issue an encroachment permit. There are going to be special provisions. There are going to be requirements. Some of it might need to be done at night. And, we're going to try and balance, cost with impact, right? So some of this is going to be dictated by DOT. Some of this is going to be up to the contractor, but there will be traffic control devices in place. There will be some detours, obviously, to get vehicular traffic moving around the construction site. And again, it's going to be kind of limited to a 1 to 2 block stretch at a time. It's not going to be a whole side of Center Street shut down and ripped up for 9 months. It's it's going to be kind of a moving project, and so whatever the traffic impacts are, they're going to be set up and communicated. The word's going to be put out to the community, the businesses, in advance of each location. And so we don't have a specific answer about what it's going to look like on any given block, but yeah, there will be vehicular detours, most likely 1 block or so off of Center Street to go around whichever section will be impacted by the construction, fencing and equipment and wherever the active location is at that point in time.
It's going to be impossible to sustain two-way traffic on Center Street in a construction zone.
Not necessarily, but I don't want to promise anything, that's
In development,
that's kind of where we're at right now. Yeah, we're coming up on 100% design in the next couple weeks. So we're kind of hammering out some of those specific details over the next month or so. Yeah. Yes.
I'll just say, ideally, we're keeping two lanes.
Most of the storm is going underneath parking, correct? From the sidewalk in that first 8 or 10 feet where the parking is.
Yes.
Probably would have that lane and then the next lane, and that still leaves the passing lane on the westbound lane open.
Yes.
On this where you're showing there.
Yep.
So I know you gotta get your dump trucks in and out and have room for everybody to move back and forth between them, but.
Yeah, that's what we're thinking.
Will there be any restrictions on them working weekends during the day on our high traffic days during the summer? Or do we know yet?
Right now, the special conditions will end up saying Monday through Friday. The contractor would have to make a request if they needed to start working Saturdays because of schedule. And it would be up to the city whether or not they wanted to do that because of the implications of having additional staff out there to respond if there's something that happens and all the additional complications with your guys' lives here on the beach.
So real quick, just to reiterate that for the recording, the question and statement was, most of the storm drain pipes are either under the parking stalls or, the curb and gutter line. So we're thinking that construction zone wise, you should be able to maintain like a travel lane and the center turn lane to use for traffic. So ideally we should be able to keep 2-way traffic going up Center Street. The question part of that was, do we anticipate any work over the weekends during the summer season, high traffic times? And the response to that is a lot of that's going to be dictated by the special provisions from SCDOT. Most likely the special provisions will not allow for work on the weekends. If that's something that comes up as a request from the contractor to make up schedule, that would be something that would need to be approved by DOT as well as the city before weekend work would be occurring.
I have a question about the trees.
Yes.
I'm assuming you're gonna take them out and you're not gonna put the same trees back in, right?
So the question was about tree removal, assuming that we are not going to be putting back in the same actual trees that we take out.
So the question is, now that you answered that, are you gonna put the trees in that have the same height as the ones now? And the second part of the question is, the trees that you take out, is there any consideration for having those replanted someplace on the island?
So the next two questions are the trees that are going to go back in, are they going to be the same height as the trees that are there now? And the second part of that is, are there any considerations for replanting of the trees that are removed elsewhere on the island? I don't have answers to either of those questions right now.
I can talk a
Please
little bit.
consider it.
Yeah, I can talk. We are starting to investigate our like tree planting. We don't want to see the trees go as much as anybody. Like that is, we're not happy about that. We are starting to talk with some local suppliers, and we want to get the maximum height, the maximum root ball, the maximum leafing out. We can get an estimate for moving trees. I've actually done that before with the Dominion project that came through. I had 4 removed from my yard, and I looked to remove them, and or replant them, and it was really cost prohibitive. But we are gonna spec for maximum growth, maximum health, so that they can really get in the ground and get going. Because you can do just like, and you probably already know this, but you can just do like the hurricane cut, which is like no roots, no foliage, and it's the survivability is much lower and the growth rate is much lower. So we're going to get the best trees we can, and we do want to plant more trees back. We're looking at 25% more trees. But thank you for that comment. It's definitely something that we were not happy to have to share with y'all.
Thanks, Kim. Yes.
What was the limiting factor for the
What was the limiting factor for the scope of the project?
Did the city come in and say, I only want you to do Center Street these couple blocks? Was it the amount of grant money you got allowed you to do this? Why did you choose 8th Street as opposed to 12th Street, where there's also Folly?
Gotcha. Did you want to take that? Yeah.
So the question was, why was there a limitation to the scope of the project being on Center Street and the immediate adjacent project areas that we've selected for this project? I think most of you will remember back to 2019, maybe 2020, when Wood Design Group or Wood Engineering, Wood did a study on a stormwater kind of master plan for the entire island, and there were a lot of recommendations that came out of it. So when we came on to help write for the grant in order to get the SCIP money, the limitation on that was $10 million. The city also wanted to prioritize a water project to remove the last of the AC pipe, the asbestos cement pipe that's in its system. So between that project and the stormwater projects, we needed to fit it into $10 million. So we looked at the areas that would have the greatest impact to the greatest number of people. So the Center Street was the obvious. It has your economic commercial area. It impacts everybody that comes onto the island. And then it also kind of fit within that $6 to $7 million range that we needed the stormwater projects to fit in. The city of Folly Beach has not forgotten any of the projects that are also on that master plan from 2020, and those will get tackled as funding becomes available. But it will be based on a prioritization for both impact and cost.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
I'm assuming, it hasn't been mentioned, but I'm assuming all the light poles will be torn out and replaced. Will they be put back up? Will we get new light poles at this point? So they're all right there along with the trees.
Yeah. So the question is, will the light poles be moved and stored and then put back, or will they be replaced with new? That is another in the 90 to 100% determination that we haven't settled on that yet.
To follow up, is burying the power lines been explored instead of light poles?
So the question is, has burying the power lines been explored? It has not. Yeah. Kenny.
Yeah, you guys are removing the green Street. You guys think inlets over there as well, or just making pipe flow?
Yeah, so the question was in regards to the ditches on Erie and Huron that we're proposing to pipe. Essentially, we'll take out the ditches, put in pipes, cover them. Will we be adding inlets to those locations as well? And the answer is yes. So East Erie, East Huron, these are currently open ditches. We're going to pipe them, and all the orange circles are going to be the inlets for the water to get from the surface down into the pipes.
And then follow up on that, are you guys putting like extra vegetation on top of that, or is it just going to be dirt and grass?
Could you repeat that?
Are you guys going to put extra vegetation on top of the area where the drain ditches? So then obviously there's already grass there. Are you guys going to put extra vegetation or just dirt and grass?
So the question is, are we going to put extra vegetation above the pipes? The plan is to do turf stone pavers and allow for street parking in those spaces. So it's not going to be paved, but it won't just be gravel. So there may be some like grass type vegetation, but we're not anticipating full vegetation because we'll be adding some parking spaces in those areas. Yes.
So if you go back to that area on the East Huron, the second, that block, it does not specify what diameter of pipe is in each specific area. So you've got a diameter of anywhere from 36 down to 18-inch diameter. How was that being determined? That's not specified there.
Yeah, so the question is, how is the diameter of the pipe being determined, or how do we know which pipe sizes are going in which places?
Yes.
Yeah, so we didn't want to put people to sleep, so we didn't put our plans up on the PowerPoint presentation, but we've got two hard copies over on the tables here. We'd be happy to look through them with you after, and on those plans we show which size pipe at every single every pipe segment, what type of inlet's going to go at every location. Generally, the furthest from the outfalls are the smaller pipes. The closer to the outfalls are the bigger pipes, but we've got all those details in the plan sets there.
So then I go on to now that area is dealt with and those pipe sizes are determined. Now, as you look further down East Erie, further down to the 5th, the 7th, the 10th, the 12th block, how those pipe sizes, because as I understand it, the pipe sizes have to, from DOT, I understand that if there's a 12-inch pipe there, all you can do along here is a 12-inch pipe. So how is that in fact affecting the 10th, 12th, whatever block?
So it sounds like the question is, how is what we're doing here impacting what's going on further to the east for future infrastructure? I don't think there's really any impact or effect. The systems are not hydraulically connected. So all of this water goes to the Center Street outfall. This water goes to a different outfall. And so they're kind of separate systems. So the work that we're doing here isn't really going to have any impact on something that's not hydraulically connected to it in terms of the pipe sizing for any future improvements outside of this particular drainage area.
Go back to the bigger, this one. So you've got all of these outfalls. So you've got the outfall here along Center Street. You got this outfall along 2nd Street.
It's pretty much every.
Yeah, it's like 3rd Street, 4th Street, all the way to 8th Street. Every single one of them is like their own bowl.
Right, we see all that. We know
Right. So the pipes out here that go to 4th Street are going to be small out here, bigger at 4th Street. But the size of the pipes over here have no impact on what can be put over on 4th Street or any of the other streets because they are independent bowls.
They'll never connect these pipes.
Correct.
Correct,
Every-
correct.
But I almost say every block has its own section of drains, storm drains, the big catch basins, their outfalls, their everything, their pipe sizes as well.
Their own watershed.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah,
that's-
you got it. You're nailing it. And
That's
you
what I'm
want to
saying,
go
is
from
where-
small to big. And if you put in something too small right now, then but we've looked at all of that, the pipe sizes that we're
this
putting
area,
in.
right, in this
Correct.
area.
And because it's disconnected, we didn't look at the other areas. Wood did. Okay,
Right.
so that goes back to that originating study
Exactly.
that comes out of this. And those would be future projects that would
Okay.
include those additional pipes or sizes or ditches or
Good,
whatever
'cause,
else. is
I mean, it's
recommended.
good that we can manage in here, because people come in and out of here, this is where we come in and out of, and this is the commercial. But we just don't want to, cut off the rest of the island, and know that it's more than just in here, it's a whole island, both sides, that deal with our water from the ocean and the river, we're a barrier island, and that's why I'm just asking these questions, to understand it for the future, so that we can know how to deal with these issues in the future. If in fact we can, and we only know that God's the only one that's gonna determine all this water, but we can do our best to mitigate it and manage it, so, alright, so that's, seems like the question was, there are individual cells,
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a great way
block-wise,
to say it.
outfall-wise, because we know where the outfalls are in various places and how those work. Okay.
You have one more question, Chris. Do you have a question?
Yeah, procedurally, so you had the 2020 wood, the city contracted wood for that survey, I'm assuming?
It was not a survey, it was a model, it was a study.
A study. And then how did you guys come along to get in with the grant money?
Great question.
So being out of the outlying areas, they want something done in the future, how exactly does that process work, do you know?
That would be a question for, I think Lee is now the new representative. We got into an area where I'm uncomfortable.
I didn't want to jump in. So the city has a RFP process. So we have a certain process we go through to solicit bids and bidders and winnow those down. We go through a whole staffing of it, identify what contractors are competitive, who's done comparable work, and talk to a lot of our counterparts who had similar work done, make sure that they're good contractors. So that's how Weston and Sampson was identified through a process such as that. They are also integral in our process of identifying the person who's actually, we haven't identified the contractor who's doing the construction work proper for us. So that's the next big heavy lift we're going to have to do, and they'll be helping kind of assist us in that process.
Okay, so you had this study done in 2020, and then the city went out and got the grant money?
Yes,
Okay.
we
And then
applied
hired-
for it.
Okay, so the city needs to go back out and get more grant money if we want to continue projects.
Sir,
All right.
we've been attacking it at all different angles, senators' offices, all the way down to state money.
Okay, and then how do you determine, I know you kind of mentioned what the biggest impact is. How is that done? I mean, Center Street's easy, all right? So now as we move past Center Street into these residential areas, how are you, because I noticed I'm not sure if you put out the water gauges, the aquarium put out water gauges. There's one on the corner of the lot, there's one. Is that part of the process of you determining where the next grant money may go?
I'm sure it'll be informational for us. I don't know if it'll be a heavy anchor as to our decision-making process. It just depends on kind of where we're at in the future. This particular program, we've got this going on. There's yet another project that's being funded by federal money for the federal water main that's going on concurrently, as well as they did mention that there's other water mains on the island that are being replaced as well. So this all kind of came together very quickly because of all the federal dollars becoming available so quickly. Do we anticipate future projects? Yes. This magnitude, this may be a once in a lifetime thing. Okay. Well,
How do we get our streets on the people section?
That's all I-
Move your house. How do we get to be, how do we get our
basically working our way out and what's the low hanging fruit, what was like the very cost effective, cheapest thing that we could do with the remainder after we had tackled the big center.
And it was an outfall that needed to be rehabilitated, which outfalls being rehabilitated helps the whole rest of the system.
So to Lee, so what happened to the wood project? Is that now just on the back burner? Is the wood project done now? They're done?
No, it's being used to inform, it was used to inform this project.
Okay. Okay.
The foundation was started.
Okay.
The first phase of it.
So we should keep sending information in, pictures.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To the city. You're gonna love me.
One quick question.
Yeah.
Where you said, talking about putting the pavers down on Huron and Erie, I guess it is, do those have curb and gutter and curb inlets, or are they just, you're just gonna have inlets in the
So the
pavers?
question is, will there be curb and gutter on the side streets that we're piping the ditches on Erie and Huron? I don't believe that is in the plans. So it would just be at grade inlets. So yeah, there's not plans right now to do curb and gutter at those locations.
Thanks for all the information.
Absolutely.
Very good.
All right, last call for questions.
And we're gonna stick around if you want to come look at the plans or anything like that.
So like I said, we got the plans if you want to dive into them, a sign-in sheet if you didn't have a chance to sign in when you walked in. We will be doing another one of these events as we get closer to construction. Again, we're happy to talk to you, answer any questions you have. We want this to be kind of an open dialogue, an open process to keep you all informed, to get the feedback from you, and answer any of your concerns as we go.